Welcome to Diary of a Muslim Entrepreneur. Today's episode is a little bit different. Today's episode is going to be more so of a 10 episode Q&A where people have put in a bunch of questions as to why I even started this pod, and a couple other questions that you might be interested in yourselves. So I guess let's go ahead and get started with the first question. Okay, so the first question here is what motivated you to start your entrepreneurial journey and how did you choose the industries that you're in? That's a good question. So motivated me? I've always had an innate desire since I was a kid. Um, even I remember distinctly when I was in the eighth or ninth grade, middle school, high school time frame. Like I told my dad, dad was telling me, Bita, you should become a medical doctor. You'll have everything and anything you want under the sun. But I wasn't passionate about it. I did try to do pre med for almost a year and a half. To I had the grades to continue, but I didn't want to pursue. I switched over to finance, although my real passion in life was probably more engineering because I loved AutoCAD. I loved creating things. I loved everything that my dad was into, whether it was mechanical engineering or creating, a brand new tool for work or whatever it was. So, uh, dad was always interested in, working on cars, and he worked on Honda and Subaru and so many other models and car types and dirt bikes, you name it. Um, and I guess it was also the lack of money when I was growing up. We couldn't afford cars. We couldn't afford, brand new stuff. Either it was delayed. And in a way, it also fed into the entrepreneurial drive too, right? That, hey, you have to delay gratification to achieve something. And maybe you might not get it now, but if you wait a little bit and you try hard and you actually execute, not just try, you'll eventually get there. Now, the industries that I'm in, I have a couple of restaurants. I was in corporate America for a long time, about 10 years or so. And in many ways, I think the skills I learned from both led me to achieving what I wanted. So the restaurants were more so of a let's try this out kind of experiment. And that led to me learning or implementing a lot of the things I learned in corporate America into the business, which allowed it to streamline and operationalize and made it more efficient, right? So the efficiency gains that the business saw had I not been there would not be present today. Um, but what businesses am I actually interested in? I love the automotive sector. I love life, so biological services, aka pharma or you know medical related services in general. I think those interest me because I've had an interest in biology and in math and science and engineering. That's always been a thing in my life. So that's what I would choose going forward. Um, any sort of investments I've made, they've been in sectors I understood. So if you ask me to invest into, let's say, a car repair shop, I'll probably know more about that than investing in, um, I don't know, a janitorial service. Although both are equally viable businesses, the problem here is that which one do I understand more and which one do I feel more comfortable with? The more homework you do in an entrepreneurial venture, it it's sort of like if you understand what you're investing in, that is what's going to allow you to achieve and grow. And I find those things really fascinating, for me at least. Next question is here: how do you balance faith in business, especially when you face ethical dilemmas? So I use Islam, or I leverage my religion to guide me in business in general. So sometimes what I'll do is I'll reach out to scholars. Hey, I don't have a clear answer on how I should approach this business deal or how I should do this according to whatever portion of the religion I follow. So, in my case, I'm a Sunni Muslim. I follow the Hanafi madhab, which is just a school of thought, and that that has some of the most well thought out, like, pieces of information regarding business and business transactions, because um, probably 50% or more of the Muslims are Hanafi. They don't realize it, or those that have come over to the West don't don't know which madhab they actually follow. In some cases, sometimes their parents will tell them. Sometimes when you convert, you're confused. Oh, which madhab do I follow? Just, you know, do follow the one that you were born with, or in the case of being a convert, follow the one that's in your community and make a decision for yourself. At the end of the day, the madhabs are meant to be guiding principles. They're not finite and set in stone. So if you want to change a madhab, you can. Um, but when it comes down to balancing faith and ethics, I also reference the books of hadith. Um, there are tons of lectures on YouTube. Maybe I can link them down below if I can find them. But those gave me a lot of clarity in terms of how I would implement, business transactions, finance, etc., into the businesses that I'm doing today. So obviously, like, I wouldn't invest in McDonald's because obviously they serve pork products and beef that isn't halal. For some Muslims, that's okay. For some Muslims, no, that's not okay. And you, at the end of the day, the viewer, have that choice. That's your decision at the end of the day. I want to know that when I go to Allah, or I'm standing in front of Allah on the day of judgment, that my decision was 100% wholly mine. And only I'm answerable to that. So I can't judge anybody for making a decision because they believe that that's right for them. And you know what? Allahu alam, Allah knows best. And if we, I think if we go with the right intentions in terms of following what we want to do in business and what we want to do, like investing in convenience stores, it's not something I would want to do. I think it has a conflict with my moral principles and ethics. I think selling alcohol or lottery tickets or things that are totally forbidden. I mean, like, just I feel morally conflicted. So why would I do things that are morally conflicting to me, which in my case align with my religion, right? Um, so I guess that answers that question right there. What are the key lessons I've learned about scaling a business effectively? Invest a lot of time into people. The people you hire help you scale your business. Um, I've found that if I do not pour myself into a person, and you know what, in some cases, they may even leave me, and that's fine. You know what? I'll just treat it as if, you know what, Allah put this person in my path for a brief moment in time. Maybe there was something for me to learn, maybe there wasn't. More than likely, there was. And maybe I didn't do a good enough job to teach them, to coach them, to guide them. So therefore, they performed poorly. Um, because the ownership onus on this is totally on me, right? If I don't communicate a proposition or an idea well enough, then why do I expect my employees to do any better? And if I want to scale, I want them to become masters at what they're doing and the tasks that they're doing. So then that way I can go do other things in another business, or in the same business for that matter. And that's how I would effectively scale people in a business or a business itself. You do it one function at a time. If you're really small, if you're really big, you can hire other people to help you do that. And whether it was working at Colgate or Ernst and Young, I mean, there are many times people have looked up to me and said, "Hey, Daniel, how would you solve this problem?" And I would come up with a solution that would make sense for the business. There's a solution that sometimes is more amicable. There are multiple ways of getting the same solution, and no one right answer exists. And that's the ambiguity of life, right? Because everything around you is dynamic and changing. So if everything around you is changing, you have to change with the times. And change is something that is never stagnant. That's persistent, right? So that's where it allows me to scale, and I think of that moment in time. And I try to adjust with that time to scale effectively. So if we didn't have AI, I wouldn't leverage AI in my tool set. But now that I do have it, I'm gonna go talk with the AI system and see what potential other companies are doing, right? So how would XYZ company or a sales consultant at a $500 million organization do something, right? I'm asking pointed questions because then that helps me understand what are the steps I need to take that are relevant to me at the stage that I'm at. So if I'm at less than $1 million in revenue, I'm going to take a whole different set of steps versus somebody who's making $10 million or $5 million. So each corresponding step has a different step ladder, I would call that, and different things to scale at that moment in time, because usually you have buckets within your business, and usually once you solve one bucket, the next bucket starts tipping over and losing a lot of revenue, or there's cost inefficiencies, etc. And you would try to solve that, and you go in the cycle over and over and over and again, and then you build up a building, so to speak, right? You build out the foundation. If your foundation is strong and it was built well, then you can scale really, really high. But if the foundation was shaky, it has a very likely chance of just simply toppling over and not being effective, because A, you haven't communicated what your value prop is to your employees. And in some cases, if you, it's sort of like being a parent. Many of the parents probably who are watching this would have an idea of, oh, if I don't teach my kid how to crawl, or they don't learn how to crawl, or maybe they learn it on their own, great, because then that's the foundational step to start walking, right? And then before they get to speaking, they start vocalizing bits and pieces of the words, and then eventually they copy the mom and dad, or brother and sister, or whoever else. And if they have more siblings, they actually accelerate their growth because they're in a community, a tight knit community, right? And that's the same thing with employees. If you have multiple employees, you actually have, I mean, studies have shown this, that people tend to learn faster in groups. And that's why you see a lot of students collaborating in one single spot, and they're learning together, and then therefore they grow and they become something great. Um, so that's the question regarding, I guess, businesses effectively scaling, right? How do you manage interest or riba in business? Usury in some languages, or I guess in the English language itself too, especially when dealing with banks and loans. If I mean, if I'm talking about it from just my perspective, I don't try to deal with any sort of interest in general. Either go earn the money and then implement, or implement in phases, so then that way you can get cash flow into the business and then dump it in. In my case, when I went out and I bought the Scovilles, or my restaurants, I liquidated my 401k, and I had a couple partners who also did the same, and they dumped money in. We did lose some money and we did make some money, right? So the question is, are you willing to take on that risk? That risk is going to be present and regardless in anything you do. But if you don't take the risk, then you did not learn anything. And I would also say, make educated decisions. We created financial pro formas. We tried to do a bunch of analysis. We tried doing a million different things to save the businesses in general. One of the businesses we had to shut down, and we lost over $100,000. And that's something that we had to live with. And in my case, I opted to pay back one of the business partners, so then that way they can make their I mean, I wanted to make them whole. It's unfair of me to take money from somebody and not make them whole again. Although, yes, Islamically, they're also supposed to take the burden of loss, but they entrusted me, right? And if I make them whole and I make that things right, then at the end of the day, more and more people want to do business with me, and that's the logic of thinking here that I have. But to answer the question, I don't typically leverage it. If I want to, I usually do equity partnership deals with a diminishing ownership structure. Um, and what does that mean? That would be like a musharaka type like structure, similar to what like Guidance has, because Guidance Residential is a private equity firm, and they use that similar model in home financing. But then they also, take that out to the secondary markets. In the case of my business ventures, I would want to do equity partnerships with profit payouts every quarter or semi-annually. And if you want to see what that looks like, from a a theoretical standpoint, because I can't show you a real example. I mean, I can make a YouTube video. You just put it down in the comments below that, hey, you want to see how that looks like, and I'll create something for you guys. The next question number 5. What inspired you to start the Diary of a Muslim Entrepreneur podcast? That's a good question. Um, Number one, I don't think that there were many Muslims out there who were, explaining the idea of Islam and business together. And what do I mean by this? Let's say, for example, you want to go into business. You don't know what kind of business you want to get into, but you don't know understand Islam in general. Let's say you don't, and you're Muslim. In some cases that might be the case, right? For some people, um, and who am I to judge at the end of the day? But let's say somebody goes into a gas station business and they're selling alcohol and other products that are completely forbidden, right? How do we get people like that go into a different business type? So then that way we can guide them to a better alternative that may not have as high margins, yeah, but at least they're doing something halal, right? And I think that's the dilemma that the Muslims face today is that we have so many options, but if we're never exposed to those options, then how are we as an ummah supposed to proceed and excel and grow? And I want to be part of the movement. I want to help the people grow and learn. And if I can be a beacon of hope for them, then so be it. I would love to be that beacon of hope. And I just think that I wish I had a resource for myself maybe 10, 15 years ago when I was in high school and college and maybe even early adult life, where I could then point to, okay, this is how I would go about solving this problem for myself, right? These are the businesses that make sense based off of whatever industry I want to be in. So, like, agriculture is perfectly fine, right? Going into tech, that's questionable to some degree, right? If I'm going into defense contracting in let's say like a Palantir type like company, which is doing defense contracting for the federal government and creating pieces of software that are affecting millions of lives, that's a moral dilemma that you have to face as a Muslim. And then there's also like the accountants or the finance person's dilemma. Hey, I'm enabling these financing activities within an organization. Am I going to be judged for this? And some people have this concern, and Allah has put it in their heart. And some people leave their jobs because of it. So it's like, let's see if we can provide solutions. Let's see if we can make and change everybody's lives in some way, shape, or form, for the better at least, right? And that's one of the things I'd love to do with this pod. All right. So that's question number 5. Question number 6. How do you stay consistent with content creation while running your businesses? That's a good question. The businesses are, I was actively involved in the Scovilles for about 2 years. And now I'm not so much involved. Sometimes I'm going there here and there, but I'm not there every day. Most of the stuff we've tried to automate, whether it's set up Toast as a POS system, or so then that way I can actively get reporting and see what things look like. But to answer the question on the consistency with content creation, right, which is I usually spend either my Wednesday, Thursday, or Saturday working on content creation. Or sometimes I'll spend my evening, right? And like today when I'm recording, it's Tuesday evening. And I just had some free time, so I figured, okay, before I head over to the mosque and go pray for, Asr or Maghrib time, I have a piece of content that I can easily edit in my free time, right? And I have plenty of ample free time now, so I figured, why not go ahead and edit and make it consistent? And usually I have maybe 10 episodes pending, so to speak, or 5 to 10 episodes, somewhere in that neighborhood. I'm trying to edit episodes every week or multiple episodes in a day. So then that way I can go ahead and have the content ready for you guys. I think having it consistent and publishing it every week or multiple times throughout the week helps me, right? Like, so my shorts, I'll try to do one a day or a couple a week, depending on how much would be too much. I think releasing one long form or two long form is ideal. Um, but I mean, I can follow that schedule. I think I could, also do a whole week of interviews and then get to a point where it's like, wow, I have so much content that I could basically cover it for the next 3 months. Um, because then I could also then segment out the pieces that I already have. And by creating a podcast, that's the benefit of it. It's one long piece of content that people can chop up and then push out to the respective platforms. So here's the next question. What books, courses, or mentors have had the biggest impact on your entrepreneurship journey? Books? Okay. Books. Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg is one book that comes to mind. How to Build Your Business in 7 Days by James Khan, or Nazim Khan, as he's known as. It's a British author. Um, and that's another book. Most recent book that I read was Buy Back Your Time by Dan Martell. Um, let's see, what other book comes to mind? There are a couple others, but those are the main ones that have come to my mind. They're podcasts that I listen to all the time, like My First Million, a deep dive with Ali Abdal, who is, a fellow Muslim as well. And, there are a bunch of others that I do listen to. Alex Hormozy is a big influence because I resonate with his story. My dad was very similar to his dad, although my dad was not in the medical profession, but my father was just as strict in some ways, and in some ways, that's something that I'm actually appreciative of, because if I didn't have that kind of force on me, I don't think I would be who I am today to a degree. So, but I can respect what my dad did for me and my younger brother. Um, let's see. My biggest mentor, I would say my mom. Initially, it was my mom because she was an entrepreneur in our household. She would, buy clothes, create them, and sell them for, casual wear, weddings, whatever, you name it. And my mom would spend hours and hours of time just doing the thing that she loved. And I think I lost that when I went into corporate America. I think that, you know, she did things that she wanted to do. She was happy doing them. So it's like, why shouldn't I do the thing that I love, which is talking to people, learning about what they're doing, and then it won't feel hard to do. This doesn't feel hard to do anymore. So I think that leads to my one of my biggest mentors. Unfortunately, I mean, like my mom, she passed away in December of 2016, and I I miss her enthusiasm, her love, her charisma, her everything. It, I mean, that's one of the other reasons this pod was created. It was to dedicate it to her. I mean, she was the greatest woman on planet Earth, in my opinion. I mean, after all, she was my mom. I mean, to think, like, imagine I was a baby, and she would teach me, guide me, protect me in many different ways. And in 2016, she didn't see what I would become. So there are many things that, you know, by the will of Allah, inshallah, I can talk to her about later on in life. And I think I was blessed. I was supremely blessed to have a mom like that, right? 25 years where, you know what, there's so many people in Gaza, so many children in Gaza and other parts of the world who do not have mom and dads anymore. Why shouldn't I be grateful for the biggest influence on my life today? And I think she was the biggest mentor. Um, are there any courses that have had the biggest impact on my entrepreneurial journey? I mean, I guess if you call YouTube a course to a degree, right? Learning from what other creators are doing and reading up and asking questions, and, you know, I guess the podcast in a way is a way to get mentorship for me for free, right? It's a way for me to reach out to entrepreneurs who are doing things that I'm interested in and learning about business, which is a passion of mine in the first place. All right, let's move on to the next question. Sorry for getting a little emotional there. What advice would I give to entrepreneurs struggling with funding and finding investors? That's a tough question. I know it's not easy. If you're struggling with funding, finding investors, maybe you don't have any money in your bank account, maybe you can't leverage the people around you, things become incredibly difficult. And then struggling. The next question is, what advice would I give to entrepreneurs struggling with funding and finding investors? And I think, I can imagine being in your shoes because I've struggled big time. Let's say you don't have any money, you don't have anybody you can turn to, your bank account's zero or negative in some cases. That's a dark place to be. And it's not easy. I I would actually say, you know what, as a Muslim, I would say number one, go pray. Because that will put you at solace. That will put you at some form of peace. Then the next thing I would do is I would start creating a list of people, of industries, of whatever else I need to do. So then that way I could actually create or email people privately. Hey, my name is Daniel or Danial. I have this podcast. I'm looking for funding to do XYZ, right? Go online, go to Y Combinator or go to, HubSpot to look up, pitch decks on how to pitch your idea or concept, right? I don't think that's the purpose necessarily of. In a way, it could be, and maybe we can create those kinds of resources for you guys at a later time, um, and then pitch, right? Understand your business. If you don't understand what you're pitching, what your business is about, and how you plan on growing it, if you receive the funding, and what would you do with or without the funding, right? How can you craft a compelling story? Is your story even compelling at all, right? If you cannot talk about a good story and make people want to be invested in it, the reason that most of you are watching today is because you're invested in a story either about yourself or about someone else. And the story about yourself is probably, how do I become an entrepreneur? Right? How do I get to that next stage? How can I get to that next moment? And to to get the funding I need. So if it's like a pharmaceutical company or something like that, make sure you're targeting pharmaceutical people, right? People who would understand your business. Or maybe if you're in the automotive sector, you go to people who are in the automotive sector and say, "Hey, I have this idea. Can you vet this?" And then you would go to other people who might have the funding that you need. Um, One of the things that Diary of a Muslim Entrepreneur was supposed to do and is going to do, inshallah, is create a network, right, of people who have the money and the funds and a way to pitch ideas for just the Muslim Ummah at large and for non-Muslims if they want to join in, although targeted for the Muslims primarily. And the goal of this is simply to make us stronger as an ummah. That's the vision I have for Diary of a Muslim Entrepreneur. It's to be the resource that I wish I had many, 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 many years ago. But since nobody else is out there doing it, and I feel comfortable, talking about it because I've had my own trials and tribulations. Yeah, I may not be as successful as people who are making tens of millions of dollars. Yes, I have reached the $1 million mark in total top line revenue, not in net profit as of yet, but there are things I've learned along the way, and I want to share all of those things. So that's the advice I would give to struggling entrepreneurs. I would also say, you have a list of people in your phone book. If you're young, you probably won't have an extensive list, but maybe you can leverage Discord groups. Maybe you can leverage If you're playing games online, maybe you can talk with people online who are making money, and then maybe you can tell them, hey, this is what I'm planning on doing. Would you invest in me? And then if they say yes, I mean, it's just a bunch of conversations at the end of the day, right? And how charismatic you are in terms of presenting an idea. And if you're really passionate about it, it'll come through. And if you're not passionate about it, it will also come through. And that will also create distance between you and possibly that investor at times, because they want to invest in people who are truly passionate about what they want to do, right? I put in a lot of effort, money, and energy into building out the pod, right? I bought the mics, I bought the lights, I bought everything. So then that way I could say that, yeah, I'm trying, and eventually I'll get there. I'll get to 1,000, a million subscribers, maybe 10 million, so to speak, 20 million, 50 million. It's just, how long do I want to do it? At least that applies to me. Um, what are the biggest mistakes you've made, and how have they shaped your success? Biggest mistakes: waiting, thinking that I have to have the perfect moment in time to do something. No moment in time is perfect. All the conditions for every moment in time are always going to be bad. And if you assume that everything's going to be bad at every moment in time, then I think you'll succeed. But if you think that you have to have the perfect moment in time to do it, I think you're highly mistaken. And that's just coming from experience. If you're if you're saying that, hey, I can't do my business, or I don't want to do this idea because I feel shy, that's on you. Because you have to come over that. You have to get over that limiting belief hurdle or hump. Um, in my case, I'm just recording stuff that I'm already doing, and I figured, you know what, why not? Why not integrate this into part of my life? Um, and that's shaped success to me for a certain moment in time, and has helped a lot. I think that belief has served me well in this season of my life. Now let's see. What are some of the other biggest mistakes? Not vetting partners well enough in deals. I thought that most partnership deals in my particular case went well in the past, and they would go well in the future. They have not. Um, have well thought out operating agreements in your contracts. Um, do not make bad hires, or if you can avoid it, please avoid it. I've hired people just to throw bodies at a problem. I think that's the worst thing you could ever do. I think one of the things that makes a lot of sense to do would be simply to do vet people properly. Find people who you know understand your vision. If it's in a restaurant, obviously the people that'll work in a restaurant are working there just to get a paycheck in most cases. They're money motivated, and they're thinking, hey, if it's easy, we'll do it. If it's not, I'll leave, right? So then they have that wishy-washy kind of attitude. And that's not to say that's a bad thing. For some people that suits their lifestyle. But in my case, I want somebody who's dependable, reliable, all these things. So, you know what? You might have to pay them a bit more in order to achieve greatness and success. So, for me, when it comes down to it, I would say either hire well or hire a lot and fire fast. Holding on to a bad employee destroys employee morale across the board, and it could financially ruin you to a degree. So getting to a point where you can manage those components, I think would really help. That's been one of the biggest failures I've ever had, is that I hired two people that were not suitable for the job, and they basically ruined me that entire month. I was suffering left and right because I was filling in the gaps, and I didn't figure out a way at that moment in time where I could get the business to run effectively, and specifically the restaurant. As for any other business, like whether it was in government contracting or whatever, right? In that case, we did a lot more due diligence. In the restaurants, it's harder to do because it's if people want to work, they're gonna come up and they're gonna have a lot more issues in general. That I've noticed, at least. It's not always the case, but it has been the case, at least in my limited experiences, is what I would say. Um, Okay, so the final question on the 10 question Q&A is, how do you approach failure and what mindset shifts are necessary to overcome setbacks? I think, at least in the American diaspora, in America, we're taught that failure is not an option, but it is an option. Why do I say this? It's only through failures that you gain some form of success. You have to try. And I mean, again, like I mentioned before in the earlier example, right? A child has to crawl or learn how to crawl before it can walk. And would you say all the number of times the child fell were failures? Absolutely. Did it learn? Yeah. Um, in some cases, you have to be really pragmatic. Pragmatic meaning practical with yourself in the sense that, okay, this hasn't worked. So let me go ahead and maybe walk for 10, 15 minutes and then come back with a fresh mind. Or maybe I need to sleep on something, or maybe I need to go pray and do salatul istikhara and then come back to whatever failure I had and see what I learned from it. What I've also noticed is that if you have a positive mindset, typically, that you tend to find the good in a lot of things. If you have a negative mindset, you tend to find the worst in things, and sometimes even you demonize yourself. And in some cases, for some people, you have to. I mean, those are your demons, right? You have to fight them to a degree. Um, in my case, I would tell myself, "Hey, I'm struggling. I'm struggling. I'm struggling. Why did you do this? Why did you do this? You dumb dumb." I'm like, but that was a limiting belief, right? I had to teach myself to say, you know what? You did what you could with the information you had. Now, you know what? What did you learn from this? Let's move forward. And by not having that negative self talk, I've allowed myself to grow in a different way. And that's what I'm really grateful for. Um, but as how I approach failure, I think those were the mindset set shifts I had to have, and whether that was going and praying more often, praying to Allah that, oh, Allah guide me in making good decisions, make me a person that makes good decisions, learning from people who already have experience and then leveraging their experiences to get good quality decisions, as well as overcoming the failures. Like, what did they do, and what failures did they have, and not necessarily compare their failures to yours, because your circumstances of life, my circumstances, their circumstances of life are fundamentally different. And you can't replicate that across the board. The closest person that would have the similar kind of scenario of life would probably be your siblings and your parents, because they were on the reciprocating end of that, or the people that were in that room with you at that moment in time. So maybe leverage those people as well, right? But I would say, don't view failure as failure. Think of it as a learning step. And from that learning step, you can move on to the next thing, which would then allow you to grow. Um, and I think that shifting from a negative to a positive mindset obviously has its benefits. It's what allowed me to grow. It also meant that every bit of feedback that I got, I did not take it negatively. I rather said, you know what? Thank you for the feedback. Let me see what I can improve, and let me come back to you. And that served me very well overall in life. Um, but yeah, that's the 10 episode Q&A. If you guys have any other questions, put them down in the section, in the comment section down below, or shoot me a DM on Insta. And I look forward to seeing you guys for the next episodes.